without them being able to say, well, that's too radical, society will never accept it. So, well, you're talking about some totally radical change bigger than ours, so, you know, it's kind of like in debates when people want to spend shitloads of money. Like once one team has said, we're going to spend like trillions of billions of dollars, you know, bombing the shit out of like every bad person on the planet, then you can spend $1 less than them on whatever else you like, and they can't complain. It's like, it's the same money, right? We're just not going to kill people. We're going to, you know, give them food. So, so it's not a kind of automatic, they go hard, you must go hard. But the first thing is make sure there's enough space. Otherwise, the debate's over. Right? You can't land it. Okay. Any other questions about models? I know we're zooming, but okay. Last slide. We sort of did run out of time, but I'm just going to plow on.
You've got time, go ahead.
Cool, because I'm a bastard. So, a couple of bells and whistles. What we just did was really basic case construction. I mean, if you could do all those things you just did on those last 3 slides, you would be shitloads better than the average novice team at Eastern. So, I kid you not. Right? If you could do all those things, you could identify debate types, you could structure, if you could set up clear definitions, if you could have a clear and well-defined model, you would be streets ahead of your average opponent. You'll win debates just from that. I remember what I said, that most teams lose at Easters because they're just not talking about the right things and they're not clear about what they're talking about, right? So they kind of phase in and out of the debate. If you can stay in the centre of the debate for a long period of time, then you'll win by default. Right? But let's kind of go a bit further than that. So, as I said, I'm going to hammer this again. Debates are about problems, identifying problems and dealing with them as effectively as you can. The person or the team that can best describe and persuade the adjudicator that they best understand the problem is already halfway to winning the debate. So, a classic example of that is, you know, if you're doing a debate about crime and, you know, what are we going to do about all these people who are, you know, chopping each other up? The first team that says, we're going to get to the root causes of crime gets a big tick from the adjudicator, right? Because they're delving a bit deeper, right? They're trying to understand the problem in a bit more of a sophisticated way rather than just saying, we're bad people, we do bad things. And so what we're going to do is we're going to lock them up. Once you start to kind of get into it, you're much better ahead. These are 3 ways that you can better describe the problem and give your team the kind of speed and the momentum that can help you through the debate, even in a scrappy, kind of unclear debate. The first one is what's called trend analysis. So, how do you identify the trends? The trends is the direction of policy for that area, right? So, it's where are things going? So let's take an example, let's just go back to economics. So, before the global financial crisis in 2008, what was the trend in financial regulation?
Deregulation.
Deregulation, right? For decades, so 20, 30 years, successive American administrations as well as governments pretty much around the world, but let's just talk about America for the sake of simplicity, went through various ways of deregulation, which means they removed restrictions on banks and financial institutions from doing things, from lending money to certain things, from creating certain kinds of financial products. So, classic example of what's called the Glass-Steagall rule. Which used to say that there had to be a functional separation between those organisations that held mortgage deposits, i.e. banks, when you think of banks, and financial institutions that had speculative financial products, so, Goldman Sachs. So banks that took deposits, that took your bank accounts that you have them right now and your mortgages and other kind of hard-backed deposits had to be physically and organisationally different from those organisations whose main stock and trade was speculating. And the reason for that was pretty obvious, which is you didn't want them all to fuck up at the same time. Because if an organisation whose job it was to bet and gamble on the economy found itself in too deep, well, that would be bad for the people who invested in that organisation. They would lose their money. But no one would lose their house because those organisations were just separate. But if you make them the same organisation, you say, banks that can take the money they've gotten from you in your deposits, the things that are in your account statements, they can take that money and they can then gamble it on the economy. If they lose, you also lose. But anyway, sometime in the Clinton administration, they removed that rule, which said that banks and financial institutions could effectively merge, either functionally or in effect. Now, that's an example of deregulation, and it wasn't the only one. There were thousands and thousands of them that I like to go through in great depth. What's the trend after the global financial crisis?
Regulation.
Re-regulation. So trends can be long and they can be broad. So the economic deregulation trend was both long and broad, right? It went for decades. It covered basically the entire developed world to varying extents. Well, they can be narrow and short, right? So if you look at, say, the carbon pricing debate in Australia, the trends there are like a bowl of spaghetti, right? In 2006, You had John Howard as the Prime Minister who said climate change wasn't real. You had a leader of the opposition who was, one of those many ones, Simon Crean, or someone who had no chance of winning, and no one really cared what they thought. Then by the time we got to the 2007 election, that trend had totally changed. You had John Howard saying, we're going to have an emissions trading scheme. You had Kevin Rudd saying, we're going to have an emissions trading scheme. Right? No difference, the trend had totally changed. Policy was now heading in a completely different direction. Since that time, the Libs have changed position, Labor's changed leaders. Labor was for it, now they're for it, then against it, now they're for it again. Right? The trends are kind of all over the place. They're not always that tricky, but it's important to know why one of the trends matter, and matter because they help you legitimise, they help you to make sense of what might be a controversial thing. So to take the carbon tax debate example again, it sounds like to a lot of Australians that having a tax on carbon, having a carbon price is a very radical thing. It sounds to them like a very hard line. And maybe objectively it is, who cares? But the first thing you want to do in the debate is try to give your case as much credibility as you can. And one way you give it credibility is to say, the trends are with us. Right? There are 32 countries in Europe, there are 10 states in the US, there's a handful of other countries from Canada to New Zealand that all already price carbon in one way or another. Australia should be next. You see how I've identified the flow? I've made it seem natural and obvious. I've made it seem far less scary and controversial. Right? You say, well, effectively there's 40 countries out there who have done it first. We're just saying, now it's our time. Right, when Australia instituted a paid parental leave scheme a year and a half ago, we were the last OECD country, right? The last of the 32 richest countries on earth to have a paid parental leave scheme. And that was one of the key arguments, right? That we waited long enough. Everybody else has done this. Everybody else has one of these. Let's just get one. And it took an idea which some people might have thought was radical or dangerous or scary or, communist, and made it seem a lot more palatable. Right? So if you're going with the trends, having that on your side makes you seem far more reasonable, makes you seem like you're in touch with what's going on. If you're going against the trend, it's still helpful as long as you can link the trend to failure. You can say, we've tried this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 150 years, and it hasn't worked. It's time to change. And even before the opposition have opened their mouth, even before you've made your first actual argument, you've already completely delegitimated their position and made it seem like it's obvious that something has to change. So here's got an example of a long-standing trend in policy, which you could argue is a comprehensive effect.
Drug prohibition.
Excellent, right? You can say we've had the war on drugs since, at least the 1970s in the US. We've thrown billions and billions of dollars at it. Millions of people have lost their lives or had them ruined. The price of drugs is lower, the ease of getting drugs is higher, and our prisons are full of drugs. Failure. So, here's the choices, folks. We can keep going and hope that the last 40 years have been, a teething problem. Or we can do something different that might work. Here's our model. Right? Just establishing the trend and linking it to failure and comparing yourself to that failed trend immediately gives you credibility. No matter what I'm about to say next, automatically sounds like it's probably better. Right? It gives you a lot more space. Second thing are norms, right? And norms are the things people agree as being reasonable, the things people will accept, the standards, the cultural standards of your society. So a simple example of norms would be, say, women's equality. It's undoubtedly the widely held, although perhaps not universally held view, that women should have equal rights to men, at least in Australia, and many other parts of the world. And it sounds like a completely uncontroversial thing to say. Well, of course they should, and very few people, even if they think differently, would ever be stupid enough to open their mouth and say it. But it's not always been so, right? 50 years ago, even 30 years ago, even 25 years ago, it wasn't unusual for women who got pregnant to leave work. For it to be common understanding that once a woman got married, that she'd switch to part-time work, and that once a woman got pregnant, that she would stop working. No one questioned that norm, right? That was a standard operating practice. That was what's expected. And in many countries, including Switzerland until the late 1960s, women weren't given the right to vote. And that was fine, right? People, until it changed, people accepted that that was right. Maybe not everyone, but obviously enough people that it didn't change. Right? Until it did. Now, why do the norms matter? The norms matter because even though norms are constantly in flux, right, there's always a trend behind norms, at any given moment in time, they are fixed and real. Right? So it may be the case, for example, if you think about gay and lesbian rights, that the norm about the level of equality that society expects for that group is less than the level of equality that society expects for women. But the trend is obviously changing. Right? The trend is obviously ramping up, but it's not there yet. Right? Why does that help you? It helps you because it helps to give legitimacy to your arguments or to take legitimacy away from your opponents. To say, this is where society's at now. This is what they accept. This is what's considered reasonable and right. And to back it up. Right? To explain why that's the case. Finally, is tipping points. And tipping point analysis is a favourite of mine because it's a way of taking the kinds of topics that topic selectors think are awesome, but are actually really hard to do as the affirmative team, and make them seem reasonable. So basically these are usually, for example, large international relation type topics like, that Israel should just pack up and, move to Arizona, just give to the Palestinians, or, that we should bomb Burma into democracy, or, we should invade North Korea, right? Like, these kind of topics sound really awesome in your topic section, like, yeah, this is going to be so hard line, these teams are going to be loving it, right? And when you're the affirmative teams, right? Because everything's against you, right? The trends are this isn't going to work, right? We're going to die. The norms are no one thinks this is a good idea, right? So we're in deep shit. But what you can do with tipping point analysis is rather than argue that what you're proposing is on its own just going to magically transform the situation, but in essence to show that your model is the straw that will break the camel's back. That you're the tipping point, right? You're the last piece of the Jenga game. That once this last thing changes, everything will change. So, how do you do that? Well, it depends on the situation you're talking about, but let's take an example of, say, North Korea. Right? And the topic is that we should pursue regime change in North Korea, which you probably won't get at ESAs unless you make the finals, but you will get sooner or later, right? Because people think it's really awesome to debate about North Korea, even though it's totally fucked. And no one has any idea what to do about it. So anyway, you can find it next to that. So, if you said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to have increased, sanctions on North Korea, economic sanctions on North Korea. We're going to squeeze them dry. I'm supposed to say people have done that for decades. It doesn't change anything. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to drop a few bombs on Pyongyang. You might say, well, that's pretty provocative and will probably lead to three-dimensional thermonuclear war, but it also won't end the regime, right? Because they're pretty dug in. Now, those things might be true, but if you can say there's a trend that we've seen developing in North Korea, and it's not on its own going to result in regime change, but with a push, with a bit of a nudge, it might get there. So, how do you identify that? Say, well, big things have happened in North Korea. Right? This idea that nothing changes in North Korea, apart from the pop songs, isn't true. Big things change. And just recently, just in the last 12 months, the North Korean government tried to completely change its economy. And it did that through a particularly interesting thing, which was called taking away everyone's money. Seriously, this is what it did, right? The North Korean government was concerned that there was too much cash in the economy, and too much of that cash was being spent outside of the established markets. You shouldn't really use markets when you talk about North Korea. Outside of the established economy and the government-run economy in the informal black markets. And it wanted to end that practice because it saw it as a risk to its control. Right? If people could accumulate wealth and thereby economic power outside of the formal mechanisms of the state, and that would be a dangerous thing for them, right? No shit. These guys might be crazy, but they're not dumb. So what they did was they said, we're changing all the currency. So all that currency you have right now, it's going to become worthless in like a week. And we're going to limit the amount you're allowed to exchange from the stuff you've got now to the stuff we're printing right now. So all these people who had squirreled away money under their beds, it all became worthless paper. Because they weren't allowed to exchange it. To exchange any more than the allowed amount would be to admit that you had all this money you weren't supposed to have, which would be a pretty bad thing to do in North Korea. So, they did it, right? They completely redenominated their currency. They shaved off like 7 zeros off their completely overinflated economy, and they changed it all back to a different kind of economy. The problem was, the people in North Korea were literally starving until these informal black markets came along to help people kind of trade and transact for food and basic goods they needed, which the government was incapable of providing. And when those markets collapsed, people went into an uproar. And there was, unusually, very unusually for North Korea, riots and protests in the streets. And if you don't think that's true, ask the economics minister, or finance minister of North Korea, who was executed because of his bungled operation of the currency exchange. Right? The North Korean government was so afraid that these riots would spread and become the kind of things we're seeing in the Middle East now, but that hadn't happened yet, that they said to the people, we're so sorry that the guy who came up with this idea, we're going to shoot him in the head. and they did it. So once you start to establish trends where you say North Koreans are starting to agitate for change,